And our next speaker will be the president of the Association of European Open Air Museums, the director of the Bokrijk Museum, Hilde Schoefs. She has studied Germanic languages, ethnology, and has history in the Flanders Culture Museum Support Center, and she's working in national and international networks. And her topic will be Open-air museums in Europe in the 21st century, gatekeepers of the culture of the daily life. Hilde, the word is yours. The floor is yours.
Good morning, dear all, dear directors, dear team. This is how, in our country, in Belgium, women or men who turn 100 years old are celebrated. And it's with flags, it's with cake, it's with champagne, coffee or tea. The people they know, which is often only in a handful anymore. But they seem happy, don't they? And there are 3 of them, which is also good. The question arises, though, and I didn't know about the Slovenian mill, because I like that image very much. Put an old one into the mill and you turn out young again. So my question was for this presentation, how can you turn a 100-year-old museum into a vibrant, relevant place and space for people of today? And that is the question, I think, and not only for open-air museums and for Brieftabas, but also for any other institution that has been in place for some time, that was created from a certain vision, and that is challenged by the times that are changing rapidly all over the world, and we are all witnessing that today. And these past years also. And it means that we have to reinvent ourselves and keep reinventing ourselves. And how do you do that? How do you turn these lovely ladies into a vibrant young one if you do not have a mill? Well, in my own museum, we tried to find a solution to that. And we kept the building blocks. And as you can see, all the different elements of the 124 historic buildings of our museum are present in the image. This is an image that we had Philippe Dujardin make. He's an artist photographer from Belgium, and he tries to deconstruct and reconstruct images of existing buildings, mainly, and turn them into a new vision. And when the museum turned 60, we invited him and we said, well, we are in dire need of a new vision. We really need a transition. And we were only 60 years old, can you imagine? So that means that we really need images too, not only words, but we need images, because images are powerful, very powerful. And this is what he made. And I remember clearly our open-air museum opens at the end of March. And we had this image in trendy magazines and glossy newspaper magazines and in billboards. And it said, reopening, 31st of March, 2016. It's always a jubilee moment for myself. It's not special, but the first day of a museum season, you want to be there. So I was there at the entrance. And normally, to be honest, if we do not have a giant exhibition, we see a handful of trustworthy visitors that visit us year after year to come up and show up. This year was another year. I'm talking about 2016. Instead of people dressed in country wear and boots, which is suitable for an open-air museum at the end of March, we saw people dressed in trendy black, high heels, and with an agenda or a newspaper in their hand. And they asked our staff, where can I see this? First it was funny. And then it turned out to be a nuisance because they were not the only ones showing up that day or the days after, because everyone thought, the museum has changed, I have to go there. And I think while we were discussing our vision and our mission with our staff, and we are a large group of staff, very different teams, very different people also, this was the best impetus that we could have as a museum to really discuss and have a discussion about why we need to change, because they saw that there were new audiences coming that were attracted by the new language and the new images that we were putting out. But what is in the name? Open-air museums. Well, actually, I'm used to running around a little bit, so I try not to hop from left to right. The rise and shine of a phenomenon. We tend to say in Open Air Museum Grimia that Skansen in Stockholm is the mother of all open air museums, but actually Bygdøy in Oslo is the father of all open-air museums, and with an advantage of 10 years, because King Oslo II, who was then King of Norway, Sweden, which was a Gesamtkingdom at that point of time, in his royal palace and his environment, he actually copied what Marie Antoinette did at Versailles not that long before. Because she too, only we do not have images of that, and she brought to the Versailles grounds a farmstead and a mill and some local buildings, a dairy. And what she loved to do there was she dressed up. She dressed up as if she was a local villager living two separate lives, the life of luxury and at the same time the life of simplicity in her self-made small open-air museum. I do not know whether King Oscar II had a fascination for rural fashion, but in any way he brought 4 farmsteads and the stavatures from Gol to the royal grounds, where it remains until today and is part of the Norsk Folkemuseum. 10 years later, in Skansen, Stockholm, Djurgården Island, Arthur Hazelius really got the vibes going, and he established an open-air museum that we do consider today as the mother of all open-air museums. And I was looking for a picture, historic picture, and I saw this one on the internet. It's from really 1901, I think. I cannot read it, 1901. And in that time, the open-air museum still housed a reconstructed housing of the Laps. Today, we would not do that anymore. But it shows us that while you can have a tremendous vision when you start your entrepreneurship, your museum, it has to change and it has to evolve over time, because society does so too. And then, not long after, I think 31 years after, the Latvian Board of National Antiquities decided to establish a museum in free nature. And we all know what has come of that. And I think I visited the museum yesterday and I was really impressed. I think you are doing a wonderful job, and congratulate you wholeheartedly and all of the team, because I think the future is now. And you have made an important decision to have this conference, not just a giant party, but a conference for discussion and for reflection to mark the special moment in time. There came more open-air museums, and this is how Brivdabas looks like in sunnier times, I guess. We had the pleasure to visit in the snow. And in 1966, there were so many open-air museums already that a small group of them from Central Europe, West and Central Europe, decided to found the Association of European Open-Air Museums. And to mark the transition from this is a Schepenbank, this is a judicial system from the Middle Ages. It's a replica, it's placed in our museum. And normally, if you lived in the Middle Ages or late Middle Ages, and you would have stolen something, then you came before this Schepenbank, because there would sit the judges, the mayor and the sheriff and so on. The picture next to that is the association in 2016, when we existed 50 years. And we deliberately chose a photograph that was much more dynamic. And again, it shows how society has changed and how our notions have changed about the conditions we operate in as museums. Open-air museums are not, or can be, archaeological open-air museums, but the open-air museums I'm talking about are especially cultural history open-air museums. And I think what we are doing today is sifting the future. And it's not only today. I think my colleague Martin from Brivdavash has done a wonderful job these past years. We have seen many buildings, but I've seen them from the inside. And I have to say that the material culture, but also the rituals, the small elements of daily life that are to be seen there are really, really well documented. And they give the idea not just of a house, but of a home. And that's something that we can relate to as a 21st century, of course. As open-air museums, and museums anyway, we have a bit of the function of a royal guard, a gatekeeper, a person who controls access to a category or status. So a gatekeeper, he or she decides what is in, but also who is in or out. This is Kerberos. He was the one, the dog with the 3 heads, I think. Yes, protecting the underground from unwanted visitors, trying to get back their loved ones from an imminent fate. And the gatekeeper is a figure that figures in many mythologies all over the world. And again, they grant or deny access. They decide who is in or who is out. And today, as an open-air museum or as a museum, we use this. It's from IKEA, by the way. I stole it from their website this morning. We have this sieve. We could also say a cookie cutter, but then we needed some more. We have a sieve, we have a lens through which we decide what we want to collect. And today, we use this sieve, and tomorrow it can be a totally different one. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, or even in 1,000 years that Alenka wished the museum to become. So it's very important that we are aware of the role that we are playing today. And if you are a gatekeeper, you're also at the same time something like a rent master. You are not only deciding on what is in the collection or out of the collection by decollecting, but you also have the responsibility to decide for the future generations on the conditions of those objects that you collect. You also have the responsibility to decide whether you only collect from past times that which is still to be found somewhere, or that you actively go out and seek and collect today's material culture. Choosing is winning, not only losing. If you define your thematic priorities as a museum, you define strategic and operational goals linked to those thematic priorities, and all of the functions, as described by the AEOM definition of museums, to collect, to preserve, to research, to program, to present, to communicate, to broker, which is a very important word in my museum, then I think that the Brivdabash Museum has an excellent future in view. What do I mean by the culture of daily life and define some thematic priorities? Culture of daily life is everything. The culture of daily life is me, standing here in this way, in this manner. It's you, sitting like this, on chairs, not standing upright and doing some exercises. It's about translators being present. Thank you, by the way, for your translation. It's also about colleagues wearing costume, playing something before the Centenary starts. It's about flags being present here. It's about this water bottle, this glass. So culture of daily life is everything. And we cannot collect everything, because then we would be, well, in Dutch we say, you don't have a face, you're not recognizable, you are blended. So if you define thematic priorities in what you're going to do, you will be able to make a difference. And I give some case examples. These are the 15 ambitions that we formulated in 2016 in Bokrijk when we were 60 years old. Remember the picture of the stacked buildings. And my favorite is this one. Ambition number 10. And ambition number 10 reads in English: we choose to depart radically from the present and no longer from the past. What does that mean? 20 years ago in the museum, if we had a new exhibition to make, we would go into the past and we would say, what would be an exciting period to talk about in our exhibition? Something that we don't know anymore, something that has changed completely. Now we have another vision. We say, what is relevant? What's keeping our people busy? What do they want to know about? And then we have a look at the past and we see if we find in the past some slice of information on that. Is it that different? No, because you always work for the future. That's what you have in common, but you depart from what's keeping people today busy and what's relevant for society today. And I think that the restoration of this warehouse in the Briefdavmars Museum is a very good onset for what you want to do in terms of collecting. You have a wonderful collection, so that's a good start. I think if you define your priorities, what do we have? And I asked for some pictures from some porcelain, but more importantly, porcelain that you use to drink coffee from. And this is one of the images, thank you, Rizite, that I received from the museum. Am I right in that it is dated 1983, or is it from 1983? Okay. So that's the question for the museum. We saw the warehouse, we saw the coffins. We know that this is also part of the collection of the museum. We have seen the sieve. If I Google the best coffee houses in Riga, then these are the images and also the objects that I see. So my question, dear colleagues, is, will you also collect these coffee cups? Or maybe you want to collect the images of the coffee cups? Because all of the coffee cups is no longer possible, because you could collect them today in 2024 and then you can start again in 2025, because we are creating and using so much. And then the question is also in regards to sustainability, how sustainable is it to keep on collecting? So these are big questions. And if you define your priorities and your strategic goals, again, I keep coming back on that, it helps you to define what to collect and what not to collect, and to create some kind of a pathway in your thinking and in your collecting. Our colleagues from Den Gamlebu, they did a wonderful job, not on coffee, but on music. They had this exhibition in the old town in Aarhus, which is a place you must visit somewhere in the future too, if you haven't been there. And they did this exhibition on the local music festival. So in the exhibition you see these pictures from 50, 60 years ago, because the festival doesn't exist anymore. But they said, well, but we have such a strong music culture here in Aarhus and nobody knows it. And okay, the festival doesn't exist anymore, what can we do? So they created a hashtag on Instagram and on Facebook, and they asked everyone attending a music festival that year to post a picture with that hashtag, because then they were allowed, according to internet or social media rules, to use it. And they had thousands and thousands of images hashtagged with this hashtag, and they chose 500 out of them. And these 500 were shown in a continuous loop in the museum between the historic images as a current present-day addition to show that music culture in Aarhus is alive and kicking. And these 500 were not only shown in a loop in the presentation in the exhibition, they were also digitally collected and stored by the museum as a sign of material culture. So maybe you do not have to go out and visit all coffee houses, but you can ask some of them if you can use their pictures, or ask visitors to post with their hashtag. Because the beauty of this system is, of course, that you do not only see the coffee cup. I go one back. Here we see them photographed as museum standards describe it, and here we see real life, or a romanticized Instagram version of real life. But anyway, we see colors, we see the way in which the glass is used, we see other foods, we see sometimes part of the scenery, clothes, and so on. So we get not only information on the object, but we get also a lot of information on the material culture of today. Some other case examples. This is one from Bokrijk. We had an exhibition, The World of Bruegel, which is also a long time ago. But the reason we did so was because our first director of the museum, he turned out, and it was kind of underground information because we really nobody knew it. He turned out to be a huge Bruegel fan, and he used the paintings of Peter Bruegel, and it is, by the way, the battle between Carnival and Lent. It's a magnificent painting if you know all of the meanings behind the different scenes. So, for example, this is the meager nun. She is associated with Lent, and here is, of course, Hans Wurst, who has eaten a lot, and who is partying Carnival. That's just one of the images. So it turned out that our first director, Josef Wijns, he was a fan of these paintings of Peter Bruegel. He used them as an IKEA catalogue. He looked at these paintings and he said, what objects are in these paintings? Because I want to have them in my collection. And it turns out that the basis of our museum collection are these paintings. So what we did is we made together with scientists, but also some columnists, we made a booklet, and we had the objects speak for themselves. That's one thing. But we also made a game through an RFID image in which some of the examples of which headwear can you use were used in a phygital, not a digital, but a phygital game. Another example is, I think, a beautiful one is Maihaugen. If this is their website, you have the rural area, the town, and residential area. But the residential area, they chose also to collect from the present, from the 1940s, 2001. Then Gamleby, they have this museum where they decided that you can walk from 1874, I think, up until today. To our time, and they have an exhibition and all elements in place to show that. So if you walk to the museum, you do not only see historic buildings 150 or 120 years old, but also these kinds of images and buildings. And as to rituals, because it's not only about buildings, it's not only about exhibitions, it's also about creating memories together, sharing stories, sharing rituals. We also already talked about identity today, and I think that's something that you are very good at, creating memories. We tried to make pirak yesterday. I'm not sure whether I pronounced it correctly, but I am convinced that none of us will ever forget it, and that's the strength of what we can do as museums, as open-air museums. We create memories and we tell stories. And we see here one of the events at the museum, I think it might be Midsummer. In Skansen, it's very alive and kicking too. But you also have totally different possibilities, like the colleagues from Beamish. Their museum is 100% historic. They refuse to add any current day or any contemporary elements. And that is their right, because that is their vision and that is their priority. But nonetheless, they say, We want to be a welcoming place for all. Diversity, inclusion and equal access are fundamental priorities for the museum. We want to be an inclusive space where everyone's stories and heritage can be experienced, respected and valued, and an inclusive culture that encourages, supports and celebrates the diversity of our staff, volunteers and visitors. In other words, it's not because maybe your vision is, no, I want to stick to the past, because I think that's the strongest story from my museum, that you cannot be relevant in your rituals, in your program, in your communication. And I very well hope that you will remember this beautiful centenary and that it will give you the impetus for the next coming years. Thank you very much.
Paldies, Hilde, no Eiropas.
Thank you, Hilde, from the Open Air Museum Association of Europe. And I would like to give you the opportunity to ask questions.
Tā, Miķel, vai kaut kas tavā galā?
Miķelis, is there someone? Oh, there is one question, please. The mic.
Man jautājums.
I have the question. What do the international organizations do to preserve cultural heritage in problem areas? We know that Ukraine has many cultural monuments, museums, and insanity is going on there. Museums are ravaged, looted. Do the international organizations have impact on those who wage war, so that there is not an empty space left after this?
The international organizations, and for example also the Association of the Open Air Museums, do something in order to help those places in the world that are currently under war situations, as for example in the Ukraine.
Yes, we do. Only we do not communicate about it, because when the war started, we received news from the Ukraine from horrible situations, and we know many a colleague there. And I have some colleagues who know even better, the colleagues living there. We had this discussion going on whether to communicate yes or no, because we wanted to give them as much materials as possible, because that was the easiest way to help. To stay in touch, that's first and for all, to wish them strength, but also how can we help the museums there, the open air museums. And I have to say that the colleagues who were very actively involved, and I cannot say who they are, they implored the association not to communicate on who they were, because they said it was too dangerous for them to communicate. So they have been driving and bringing loads and loads of materials that they collected in their neighborhoods to the museums in place, and they still have contact with the people working there. But they felt it as dangerous, and they didn't want to be involved, neither also in the diplomatics or the politics of their own countries.
Thank you, paldies. Vai jums ir vēl kāds jautājums?
Thank you. Do you have any more questions? If there are no more questions, then I would like to announce something more important.
I will translate for you, okay? Because it's important that you understand. Pirms
100 years ago, this day, the decision was taken to establish the museum. And 100 years on the 2nd of February 2024, we would like to give your centennial badge of honor. That's a special award from us.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So, 100 years ago, it was the day when this very important decision for us was made, the foundation of the museum. And today, 100 years later, we are opening our special museum sign of honor. And the first one today, we would like to give also to the European Association of Open Air Museums. And therefore, I will invite our director, Zanda Tjärgalve.
Thank you very much. I feel quite honored. Talking about material culture and strategic goals, very strategic. Thank you, and all of good luck.